What's going on, everybody? And welcome back here to another week on Guns and Butter with your favorite cousin, Kinda G. So, last week I told y'all that I was going to come up with a name or a theme for all these crazy October episodes. And I think I came up with something goofy yet catchy enough to share with y'all. Drum roll, please. What do y'all think of Kai-Tober's Fright Fest? Yeah, I don't know about that one either. But whatever, for now, that's what we're gonna go with. Okay, so anywho, for this week's chilling October episode, I'll be giving you guys a two-part serial killer case. And every time I start looking into a serial killer, it just blows my mind at how many serial killers there actually were. And the more digging I do into these serial killers, I find out that a lot of them were operating during the same time in the same areas. And I know the world was a crazy place back then because with all the serial killers, and then on top of that, just regular killings and regular crimes, how did detectives working these cases know which bodies belonged to which killer? Because to just name a few, there was the Golden State Killer, the Hillside Strangler, the Night Stalker, and even Samuel Little ran through LA for a time. And a lot of these creepy killers were hiding in plain sight, like they were neighborhood people. They had families, they had jobs, they were seemingly normal. So I know it was a lot for detectives to keep up with all these bodies and to think that your favorite neighbor is the one out here committing all these crazy crimes. But to take it even a step further, each one of these killers had their own distinctive MOs. So with that being said, grab y'all's wine, grab y'all popcorn, and for the next two episodes, I'm going to be telling you guys about the serial killer dubbed the Grim Sleeper.
That's what it's all about. Guns and butter, baby.
So if you didn't already know, it's okay. But in the 60s, a lot of black folk were relocating to LA with the hopes of finding better job opportunities and to essentially make more money. There was a lot of factories opening up at this time, so a lot of people were able to significantly improve their lives because of this. Now, I don't know if it's just me or if other people see it this way as well, but it's kind of almost as if you were a woman during the 70s or 80s and you were out on the streets prostituting or on drugs, didn't really have your life together, you made yourself really vulnerable to fall victim to one of these serial killers. So in 1985, when the bodies of these women were found dumped in alleys or in dumpsters, originally the killer was given the name the 22 caliber killer. But it wasn't until 2016 when the man dubbed the Grim Sleeper was finally held accountable and convicted of killing 10 women and attempting to kill one. But all of his victims ranged between the ages of 15 and 35 years old. They were all black, some of them poor and on drugs, but they all lived in South Central LA and their bodies were found within a 4-mile radius of one another. And the bulk of his murders occurred between 1985 and 1988, during a time when crack was at an all-time high. But after going on a 3-year killing spree, he took a 14-year hiatus before returning to the streets to commit another murder in 2002, which is where the term sleeper came from and the name Grim Sleeper. And out of all the women that he killed, there was only one known survivor, and her name is Anitria Washington. However, at the time, she didn't know that her near-death encounter with this man would open up a whirlwind of unsolved cases committed by the Grim Sleeper. On Saturday, November 19th, 1988, and it's a nice evening around 4 or 5 p.m., 30-year-old Anitria Washington was just getting off work from working her CNA job. So the plan for this Saturday evening was for her to get off work and to walk over to her homegirl's house so that they can go to a party for the night. But on the way to her friend's house, she has to pass a liquor store. And as she passes the liquor store, she sees a bright orange Ford Pinto with a white racing stripe sitting out front, which she later recalled looking like a little Hot Wheels car. But anywho, out of nowhere, the short black man driving it, who was described as being neat, tidy, kind of geeky looking, and he's wearing a black polo shirt and khaki pants. So as she's walking by, she notices the orange Pinto and she checks it out a bit. And that's when the man driving it notices her noticing it. And he says, I see you looking at my car. Can I take you where you going? And initially, she's like, nah, I'm good. I'm right up the street from where I'm going, so there's no need for a ride. And he responds by saying, quote, that's what's wrong with you black women. Nobody can ever do nothing nice for y'all. So she started to feel a little bit bad for turning down his free ride. So she gives in and she's like, okay, you can take me up the street. So she hops in the car. When she first gets in the car, everything was going smoothly. The conversation was polite, and she didn't feel like she was in any type of danger going literally right up the street. But within a blink of an eye, everything changed. Instead of keeping straight, he instead makes this abrupt left turn. And as soon as he makes this turn, his mood switches completely and he turns into a different person. So Anitria was completely thrown by this. And things only got weirder when he started calling her by another woman's name. To this, Anitria is like, who do you think you talking to? And he only responds by saying, quote, why you keep dogging me out? And she's like, dogging you out? Wait, I don't even know you. Then he starts going on this crazy rant. And she's like, oh God, I gotta get out of this car. And before she knew it, he had pulled out a .22 caliber handgun and had it pointed directly at her chest. But before she could even think, he shot her. After being shot and not even knowing it, she starts drifting in and out of consciousness, and then she remembers feeling a heavy weight on top of her. At the time, she didn't know it, but this was him raping her. And all at the same time, while she's drifting in and out of consciousness, she remembers seeing flashes of light, and this would be him taking Polaroid pictures of her. She remembers pleading for her life and asking why he shot her and asking him to take her to the hospital. And while she's sitting in the passenger seat of this car bleeding out, all she could think about was her kids. If she died, who would take care of them? And then all of a sudden, she remembers reaching for the door handle and then being pushed out of the car all in the same breath. After rolling into the street, this man just drives off and leaves her for dead. And by nothing but the grace of God and pure will, she was able to pick herself up off the street, shot in the chest at that, be conscious enough to recognize where she was, then walk several blocks down the street to her friend's house. When she gets to her friend's house, she collapses at the doorstep. It wasn't until around 1 o'clock a.m. when her friend returned home from the party that they were supposed to be at together and found her laid out on her front doorstep. After the police and ambulance were called, Anitria was rushed to the hospital. And cousins, this woman was strong because even after being shot in the chest and left for dead, while she was in the hospital, she was conscious enough to tell the LAPD detectives what happened to her. So, with the help of Anitria's account of her attack, they were able to draw up a composite sketch of this man. So, during the time of Anitria's attack, LAPD detectives were actually already investigating a string of murders that they were calling the Strawberry Murders. Now, I had no idea this was a thing, but strawberry was actually a street term used for prostitutes or hookers. So at this time, they knew that a man was out there picking up women and shooting them in his car. And they believed that Anitria was another one of his victims. But do you think they disclosed any of this information to her? Absolutely not. So unbeknownst to her, this crazy man had already been killing women for years before he had attempted to kill her in 1988. Now, family, I know y'all enjoy lifting and going to the gym just as much as I do. So if you want to take your workouts to the next level and be thicker than cold peanut butter, then Alpha Progression app is the app for you. Alpha Progression is a no BS training app for muscle growth. And this app was made for any and everyone to use while training to be the biggest and strongest version of yourself. It uses a super innovative workout logger, making it a great tool not only for seasoned lifters, but for beginners as well. Workout plans are generated from scratch and according to your specific needs. So all you have to do is let the app know what you want to do, what muscle groups you want to work on, and even the equipment you have. And boom, there you have it. It'll generate trillions of different workout combinations to choose from. Strength training is all about progression. So the app will use its unique algorithm to analyze your past performances and give recommendations for weights and reps to use in every set. So if you're ready for the ultimate pump, visit alphaprogression.com/kindag and unlock 20% off your first payment. The identity of the Grim Sleeper didn't come to light until years later in 2010. And no cap, this was a black man that lived in South Central Los Angeles in the same neighborhood as the victims he was killing. And this man that they were calling the 22 caliber killer, who went on to be named the Grim Sleeper, was actually a man by the name of Lonnie David Franklin Jr. And this man by the name of Lonnie Franklin was a neighborhood man. And he was known as the go-to guy because if you needed something fixed, he got you. You needed a TV, he got you. You needed a car, he got you. You needed your brakes done, he got you. And the list just goes on and on for what he was doing for his neighborhood. So I don't know if y'all just caught me when I said if you needed a car, he got you. Because this man was also out here stealing cars too. And that's why it came as no surprise when police showed up to arrest him in 2010. Look, because everybody was standing around thinking that he was just getting arrested for being a car thief after all these years. Not because he was around here a whole ass serial killer, literally living in a bright green house in the heart of the neighborhood. So who was Lonnie Franklin Jr.? Lonnie was born August 30th, 1952, to his mother Ruby and father Lonnie Sr. in South Central LA. So there's not a whole lot of known information about his childhood, but what we do know is that he had an older sister that was about 5 years older than him and an older half-brother from either his mom or his dad's previous marriage. And we do know that as a kid, he was sick a lot. Like he always had a cold and he always had a headache. And because of this, he spent a lot of time laid up in the bed for days at a time. And as he was going through his adolescence and teenage years, he did have the support from his father. And his dad was actually the one that introduced him to his love for cars. And this man taught him how to drive when he was only 7 years old. So he was really embracing his son's love of cars. And it was also said that he struggled a little bit while he was in school. And it wasn't until he was accepted into the school's work study program where he was actually given the opportunity to put his love of cars to use. And this is when he discovered that he was really good at being a mechanic. But growing up, he was very charismatic. He was a people person and he was a good talker. And this became a very big part of his persona later on in life. But overall, he was a very charming young man and he had no problem finding little girlfriends. It wasn't until 1969, when Lonnie was about 16 years old, when he got arrested for stealing cars. And it's not known if he faced any real consequences after this. But the following year, his little young ass got expelled from school for fighting. And after this, his daddy was like, oh, hell no, I already see what type of path you going down, so you know what you about to do? Take your ass on to the military. So on July 26, 1971, Lonnie enlisted into the good old U.S. Army. And his first duty station was in Stuttgart, Germany. I hope I said that right. And after being stationed out there for a couple of years, it's around April 17th, 1974. Lonnie and a couple of his battle buddies are cruising around Germany in a little Fiat. It's around midnight. Now, the accounts of this night differ because everybody was pretty much pointing the finger at one another after they got caught. But for the most part, this is the story that we have. Okay, so what we do know for sure is Lonnie was the one driving. And like I said, it was around midnight. The three of them are cruising around up to no good, just looking for something to get into. And they pull up alongside of a woman sitting at a train station waiting for a ride home. The two battle buddies hop out the car and ask her for directions. But before she can even get a half a sentence out, she's already being attacked and being pushed into the car. Both dudes hopped in the back seat with her, and one of them was holding a knife to her throat. Lonnie then drove to a ducked-off field where there was no street lights, in the middle of nowhere. The three of them then forced this woman to take off all of her clothes, and then at some point, the three of them started taking turns raping her. This assault lasted for about 4 to 5 hours. Ugh, this just disgusts me. After a while, she decided that her best chance at survival was to just play along, and it ended up working out for her. She survived, and they ended up dropping her off at home the next morning. And y'all, listen to this. When she's getting out the car, this creepy ass dude Lonnie had the nerve to hand her his number. On some shit like, yeah, girl, I enjoyed you. Maybe we can do this again sometime. So after being dropped off, she didn't know if she was going to report this or not. But after mustering up enough courage, she decided she needed to call the police to report this attack. So of course, when she's reporting it, she lets the police know that one of the dudes gave her his number. And they're like, this is all very interesting and coincidental. You see, they were already investigating the attempted abduction of an 18-year-old girl that happened about an hour before her assault. So, an 18-year-old girl was sitting at the bus stop, just like she was, and a Fiat with three men slowly pulled up alongside of her with their lights off. Two men hopped out and tried to push her into the car, but luckily there was a bystander who started screaming for police, and the girl was able to get away. So, after reporting this, the police thought the best chance of catching these three perps would be to use the phone number that was given to the victim. So they figure if he was dumb enough to give his number out, then sure, he'd be dumb enough to link back up with her. So they asked if she'd be willing to call him up and set up a little rendezvous. So she reluctantly agrees and she calls the number. So the plan was for her to call him up, act interested, set up a little date, and when they got to the meetup spot, she was supposed to be holding a napkin. When she sees the guy, she was to drop the napkin. So if everything goes as planned, they would have their guys. And surprisingly, the plan worked out flawlessly. They were able to apprehend Lonnie, and this guy wasn't smart at all because when they search him, they find the exact knife he used the night before to attack this woman. So once he was caught, he wasted no time singing like a canary on his battle buddies. So the three of them were all charged with kidnapping and rape, and for this, Lonnie received 3 years, and the other two guys received 4 years, each of them all to be served in a German prison. And I'm almost positive after being caught this one time, he realized that for one, he had to work alone, and two, he couldn't leave any victims alive. And it was at this time when a serial killer was born. Lonnie only served 2 years of his sentence, and on May 5th, 1976, he was discharged from the Army. But for whatever reason, he wasn't given a dishonorable discharge, which would have followed him for the rest of his life. But instead, he was given a good old general discharge. So after leaving the Army, he took himself back to LA and went on about his merry business. Back in LA, it's now the early 80s. Lonnie meets then later marries a Belizean woman by the name of Sylvia Lino. They go on to have 2 kids, a daughter by the name of Crystal, born in 1978, and a son by the name of Chris, born in 1981. So up until 1981, he was working little odd jobs here and there until he got a job as a mechanic working for the LAPD. And this mechanic job just pretty much got his foot in the door for a better opportunity because he would go on to start working for the Los Angeles Department of Sanitation, which offered better pay and better hours. So no sooner than he got this good sanitation job did he start trying to cheat the system by filing multiple injury claims. And between 1981 and 88, he filed damn near 10 different claims, to the point where a team of 3 doctors were brought in to check him out and they decided that his claims were credible. But it took him a long time to actually be approved because before this, 2 other doctors said, absolutely not, he's faking it, there's nothing wrong with him. But eventually he would go on to start receiving his disability payment. So after this, he was able to sit back and just collect his little disability checks. But he knew damn near everybody in his neighborhood in South Central LA. He talked to every one of his neighbors. He was pretty much the neighborhood socialite. His neighbors said if you didn't want to get into a 15 to an hour long conversation about neighborhood gossip, then don't walk past this man's house. But all at the same time, this man was the known neighborhood car thief. He would buy stolen cars, tune them up, change the brakes, change the interior a little bit, and then resell them. However, his criminal record dates all the way back to 1969, far before all of the murders began. He had been charged with possession of stolen property, a misdemeanor assault, and he got a misdemeanor battery charge that he served time for as well. But as the years passed, Lonnie and Sylvia's home life wasn't always peachy. You see, although she was his wife, she wasn't his only woman. And this wasn't a secret to anybody in the neighborhood either. He would go around bragging about all their business and all the side women that he was messing around with. And every other day he was bragging about who he was fucking on and who he met. And he would even go as far as to show his friends pictures of these women. And it's just sick to me because he would show his friends these pictures, and in all of these Polaroid pictures, it would be of women who were usually unconscious and naked. And all the guys in the neighborhood would just sit around and laugh and joke with him. He would, of course, never get called out for any of his BS or the women that he talked about, and he was able to carry on just being this nasty, creepy man. But he was known to always make perverted, slick remarks about women. And he was also known to always sneak out late at night. And it was during these nights when it was said that he would go out picking up prostitutes. You know, they would turn a couple tricks for him and he would offer him some drugs or some cocaine in exchange. And that was just his norm. And he always had a nickname for the women that he was messing with, like turkey thigh, horse lip, droopy titties. Like he didn't give a damn. To dog a woman out was nothing to him. But later on, years later after being caught, police found this notorious collection of over 500 photos of women. And along with this stash, they found women's jewelry and a few other items that would trace back to his victims, including an ID that belonged to his final victim. Authorities would also go on to discover items belonging to missing women who, to this day, have yet to be found. It's said that a lot of serial killers often keep trophies from their victims, like underwear, pictures, jewelry, things like that, so that they always have something tangible to remember their victims by. And these trophies are typically fantasy-driven rituals. Like if y'all remember Samuel Little, all of his trophies were his memories. But having these physical manifestations of a killer's compulsions can tell you a lot about who they are and their deepest desires. But it's very chilling, in this case particularly, to know that the women in these photos that they found in Lonnie's house may belong to some of his victims whose bodies have yet to be found. So let me take y'all back in time to 1985 in South Central LA, where it all began. 29-year-old Deborah Jackson, who was the cocktail waitress at the time, left her kids with a neighbor while she ran to the store, never to be seen again after that. Her body was found on August 10th, 1985, in an alley near West Gage Avenue in the Vermont Slauson area. She had 3 bullet holes in her chest. And to authorities, Deborah Jackson is Lonnie's first known victim. But at the time, it just looked like a single isolated murder. They didn't know that they would soon be investigating a string of murders following Deborah Jackson's. Because on August 12th, 1986, another body of a black woman was found in an alley. But this body had a mattress placed on top of her. She was later identified as 35-year-old Henrietta Wright. And she too had been shot in her chest. But with no DNA evidence left behind and no witnesses, it wasn't until much, much later when her death was actually able to be tied to that of being one of the Grim Sleeper's victims. And for a long time, this was the case for a lot of these murders. So on top of being bombarded with all these murders during the 80s, and to be in the middle of the crack epidemic, investigators just thought that these killings were that of typical LA shit. You know, drugs, gang violence, stuff like that. They had no idea that they needed to connect all of these crimes to one person. So for this reason alone was probably why Lonnie was able to carry on for so long. So like I just said, detectives weren't putting the pieces together, and a serial killer wasn't their first idea as to what was going on in the neighborhood. You see, in LA, violence was already pretty prevalent. Drive-by shootings, gang violence, this was something that was just happening every day. But by now, a pattern was starting to emerge with all these victims. They were all vulnerable black women, found dumped in the streets or grimy alleys. But what set him apart and distinguished his MO from other serial killers during this time, with the exception of his last 2 victims, they were all killed with a .22 caliber handgun. But more on the Grim Sleeper when we return next week. Y'all make sure you come back to this dinner table. Come back next week so you can hear part 2. And show me some love on whatever platform you're listening to and let me know what you're thinking of the cases I'm doing.